Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar titled 5 Secrets of Saving for College. This is a part of our Money Matters series here at the Champaign Public Library. I'm Eva Liu, a reference librarian at the library. Thank you for joining us today. We are currently open to the public with regular hours. If you are not comfortable coming to the building, we are operating our phone and virtual reference services as well as curbside pickup for any items you would like to check out. For more details on this and all the latest library news and updates, please visit our website at champaign.org. Or you could follow us on social media, chat with us, or email us at librarian@champaign.org. Moving to a couple of Zoom features available to you that might help you during this webinar. There are some icons at the bottom of your Zoom screen, depending on your device. On the far left, you have the options that controls your sound and your speaker. Moving to the right and toward the center of the window, there is a chat and raise hand option. We invite you to type your question into the chat and click the raise hand button if you prefer to speak and ask your questions. Finally, I would like to introduce our presenters for the evening, Sue, Plisch, and Josh Carter, financial planners with Bluestem Financial Advisors, a local fee-only financial planning firm located in Champaign. So Sue and Josh, thank you for being with us. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Eva.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. We're excited to present today on secrets for saving for your children's college. So we'll just introduce ourselves before we jump in here. Sue, do you want to go ahead and bring up the good stuff?
Sure.
So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Josh Cutler. I'm a CFP, which is short for Certified Financial Planner, and I'm also an enrolled agent with the IRS. And I'm a lead advisor, a lead planner, and co-owner of Bluestem Financial Advisors. Like Eva said, we're located in Champaign and have been in the area for well, I guess about 3 decades now, or a little over 2 decades now. So we've been doing planning for a while and work with households all shapes and sizes. And really the goal for us today is to just share some of what we know about saving for college and how we help our clients, make progress in that area with those goals. And we're super excited to jump in. So turn it over to you, Sue.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So I'm Susan Plisch. I'm a financial planning resident at Bluestem. And I come from the world of mathematics education. So just to get started and jump right in, I want to say that parenting is not for the faint of heart. It starts with midnight feedings and diaper changes. It moves on to toddler temper tantrums and endless chauffeuring to activities. Then in high school, you hit teenage angst and driver's ed. And finally, there's that last hurdle before launch, paying for college. And so I'm hoping that what Josh and I share tonight can make your journey through launching your children a little bit easier. The first secret of saving for college involves taking care of yourself first. So you may have heard it said on airlines, in the event of an emergency, please put on your own oxygen mask first. And saving for retirement is similar. You need to save for your retirement because no one will loan you money for retirement, but your children can borrow for college. I believe saving for retirement can be a gift to your children as well as yourself. In terms of nuts and bolts, we recommend that everyone save at least 10% of their pre-tax income, and 15% is better. And once you're doing that, you can make a plan to save for your children's education. Now, sometimes saving 10% of your income can sound like a lot. One trick is to consider saving a smaller amount, maybe 3% or 4%. Adjust yourself to that new having a little bit less money coming in every time from your paycheck. And once you get used to that, maybe raise it another percent, and then wait a few months, raise it another percent, and slow and steady wins the race. And the math teacher in me wants to show you this next slide about not delaying saving for retirement. So in order to make an example, I had to choose a number. So I have chosen that in this example, a couple would like to build a $1 million retirement fund. I'm not saying that's the right size for everyone. Some people might not need that much, and some people might need more, just depending on their expenses. But in this example, you can see that if you start saving young, for example, when you're 25 and you save every month until you're 65, it turns out the amount you need to save is really small, $330. Well, maybe not that small, but fairly small. And delaying saving for retirement each decade, it's going to increase the monthly amount you need to save until, if someone starts saving at 55 and still hopes to build that $1 million retirement fund in 10 years, they would need to save $6,000 a month, which, is a pretty hard thing to do. So this is something great to tell your kids to do as well. Once they finish college and start a job, just recommend that they start saving for retirement right away. So now over to you, Josh, with our next secret.
Yeah, and this is something that I think it gets more and more emphasized every time I have conversations with parents about saving for college, which it actually starts. It starts without any financial details, and it's more of just opening conversation with your children and just opening the lines of communication. So you see here, communication with your student is key. Start early and communicate often. And sometimes, with every child is different. So that communication can start in different ways. Some children are very interested in starting that conversation, and others are maybe more resistant to it. But the key is to continue to try and give the opportunity for the topic to be discussed. And just if you start early enough, then there's not as much pressure for a child to engage and feel like they need to make a decision. In today's day and age, college is a very stressful event when children get into high school. So I think having these conversations even as early as junior high school, middle school, even before, just maybe not talking about college, but just the future and how the things that they're doing now can, people find their interests, and it's important that we all focus on the things that we really love to do and that we care about. And those conversations can start so simple and then grow into future college conversations as the conversation blossoms over time. Sue, do you want to hit the next slide? So again, as the conversation is unfolding over time, it helps to steer children in the right direction of, you know more and they know more and are more aware of what is important to them and what they might be interested in, as opposed to just, having a conversation with them in their junior year or senior year in high school, and they just kind of throw their hands up and say, I don't know. I'm not sure what I want to do or where I want to go. And that might be the case regardless of how much you talk about this, but you increase the probability of a student getting placed with the right school, with the right disciplines when you start these conversations early. So as you can see on here, there's two costs of undergraduate education, the University of Illinois and then Northwestern University, which is Northern Illinois. And University of Illinois is an in-state public school. It's a public institution. And Northwestern University is a private school. And you can see the difference in the costs. So I've run across several situations where, I think children oftentimes, without having a conversation about the numbers and the funding, like what parents can afford to provide for college, and just letting kids be aware of, like, this is what college actually costs. I think children can end up making decisions based on where their friends are going to school, what places, sound fun, or, or just prestige alone, without really matching up with what they are interested in and what universities have programs that would best suit them. Also, all children aren't, made for, or, those big institutions aren't always what's best for every student. Sometimes small private universities can be a great fit, and have a high price tag, at least initially. But again, having conversations about these things and understanding some of what Sue and I are going to talk about today will help you realize that the ticket price on some of these universities, even the private universities, you can't just go on the face value. So one of the big differences here is the other thing that I'll point out is a lot of parents don't know, and children don't know, what institution they're going to end up at. That is one of the last decisions that gets made. So it's very hard to plan for a specific cost. So I think it's important to, again, have conversations about what these things cost, and have a funding plan. Go into planning for college with an amount in mind that you want to provide. So setting a goal and working on figuring out, what do I need to do to meet that funding goal? And then, everybody is capable of saving and motivated to save in different ways. I'll just throw out a couple examples, some kind of two ends of the spectrum. So let's say parents, or family A wants to provide a full ride for undergraduate education wherever the child wants to go, whether it's an in-state university here in the state of Illinois, or it's an Ivy League university on the East Coast. The difference in cost between those two, as you could imagine, is can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future. So it's important to first clarify the goal. Where, once you've had these conversations and made the child aware of the gravity of some of the decisions, and making sure they're being intentional with the choices they're making, then we start talking about numbers. You start thinking about numbers and what do some of these universities cost? And it's up to the parents to decide what they're comfortable with funding. Because if you're starting early saving, you're obviously, the child's not going to be able to communicate what their interests are going to be in 18 years. So being aware that these costs can be all over the board, and University of Illinois is a more expensive in-state public school. There are smaller institutions like Eastern Illinois University, Southern Illinois University, Northern Illinois. Some of those other state schools have smaller cost of attendance, and so the cost can be lower. And then not on here are community colleges, where some children can actually attend community colleges and get the first 2 years of college out of the way for free. So it's just very important to know that the 4-year institution doesn't always have to be the way to go. So, and there's so many different combinations, so many different possibilities, that it's important for the parents to understand what's most important to me to fund for my child, and then again, making a savings plan based on that. So Sue, do you want to do the next slide? So there's a ton of different ways that college can be funded, and in some of these things you're just not sure. Sometimes if there's grandparent savings involved, or you're not sure what kind of student the child's going to be, some of these pieces of what can contribute to funding a college education, you don't actually know about them until way far into the game. So, when the students, junior high in the teen years, or even closer to college. So we've listed here a few ways, different ways of funding college. Of course, parent contributions, where, and I want to clarify these 2 bullet points here under parent contributions, savings and ongoing cash flow. So savings would be accumulated savings, like, you're saving for retirement, you're building up a pot of money. That's what we're referencing when we say savings. Savings can come in a few different shapes and sizes, and Sue will talk about that here in a little bit, but that's what we mean by savings. Ongoing cash flow, and some parents do this, those that their children are right at college age, and maybe they haven't accumulated anything. They either aren't providing any support or funding for their children's college, whether that be intentionally or unintentionally, because maybe there wasn't foresight or the ability to save. It's also possible to just fund through ongoing cash flow. That's a little more difficult when you see the prices of some of those institutions. Most people, it's very difficult to cash flow $30,000 to $80,000 a year for college, and then especially if you have multiple kids in college, that's a pretty big item to try and cash flow, and it all dependent on the goal, of course. So student contributions would be another thing that you can consider. There are some pros and cons, and this is all these are values-based things that, again, it's different for everybody. There's no one size fits all solution, but student contributions and just having the student at a minimum, of course, aware of what this college education is going to cost. But also, again, if you have committed to a funding amount as a parent, saying, hey, we'll pay for half of your undergraduate education, or we're saving up and we've saved up $100,000, which would be an awesome job, saving up that much for college. Let's say we've saved up $100,000, and that's what we have to commit for your education. How you go about using it, that's part of that communication, and that's why I'm using that word a lot. Communication is key. Setting the goal, being intentional about trying to reach the goal, understanding what it takes to meet the goal, and using the right vehicles to get you there. And then again, communicating and having a conversation. Here's what the costs of these different institutions comes out to be, and here's what we have to provide. So child, if you're looking at Northwestern University versus maybe starting with 2 years at a community college, well, that $100,000, you might use that up, and you might end up with student loans, or a student needing to provide some of this extra, doing part-time work or finding scholarships, or, making up the difference would be on the student. And I think you really empower a child when you involve them in this conversation and you give them some control over the decision. All you have to do is equip them with the information, and most children will surprise you. So again, with that example, saying, hey, we've got $100,000 and saved up, and you want to do Northwestern for 4 years, but you aren't quite sure what career path you're interested in, or what you're interested in multiple things. What about just going to maybe starting in an in-state school and, considering like a private school for graduate work, or like I said, maybe getting your gen eds out of the way at a community college, or taking a year off even, which is becoming more popular, taking a year off and just, being an adult and seeing what that feels like if you're not sure about college. So again, the conversation is key. Setting a goal, being intentional is so key, and just having a good, well-built and well-executed college funding plan. And then, the thing that I did not touch on, which is such an important part of college funding these days, is student loans. I think it's not having these conversations ahead of time. The students will just end up with an amount of student loans that they don't even, it's the process for federal financial aid is it makes it so easy for you to just sign off on accepting student loans. You never, you don't realize how much that's going to impact your cash flow when you graduate. And so again, having a coordinated conversation about, here's what we can provide, here's what's up on you to provide if you're wanting to go to this, let's say Northwestern University or this Ivy League school on the East Coast. Here's what that cost is. Here's what we can provide, and here's what's left. Here's what would be left for you. And here's what the student loans come out to be. And then, there are online calculators. You can just look up student loan calculator, And seeing the payments and understanding, how that might impact future cash flow can be a powerful tool. Just to be thinking ahead about, oh, maybe a student might say, well, I don't know, $100,000 of loans kind of seems like crazy. That's more than the mortgage that we have. So again, these conversations can uncover a lot of good tidbits that can enlighten your child and help them feel empowered in making a decision. Let's see the next slide. So one of the things that I didn't discuss, I kind of mentioned it indirectly, is the 1/3 method. Like I said, there are a lot of different methods kind of to mix and match methods for savings. And we have an example here, James and Jessica, they're beginning to save for their 10-year-old daughter, Jade, to attend an in-state public university. So let's say that U of I, and they want to provide 100% support for U of I. Well, they would need to save $1,300 a month to provide that support. And I think one trap, like I've been harping on this a lot, but I think one trap that parents fall into is they don't have the conversation. So they save all that up, and then they just kind of expect that their child, that Jade's going to go to the in-state public university. So there's a lack of coordination, a lack of information that Jade has, so that she can make an informed decision and be involved. So I think there is some value in setting an expectation, and this is just from my experience. Every person has their own values and what they want to provide for college. But one idea, if you want your kid to have some quote unquote skin in the game, we've talked about this with clients before, and using the 1/3 method, meaning that you're providing, as the parent, 1/3 of the support for college, and then the child is responsible for scholarships and grants and that sort of thing to provide another 1/3, and then the remaining 1/3 is up to them. They can work to fund that, or they can they can like a work study or part-time job, internships like we mentioned, and student loans would be an option too. And one thing I don't want you to feel is that student loans are a bad thing. They can actually be a very good thing if you're intentional about using the loans to leverage your ability to get a great education, which would in turn result in higher potential income if it's done right. What's not a good use of student loans is just accepting an enormous amount of student loans without a plan. It's important to understand, if I'm going down a career path, what is my income potential? And Sue will talk about this a little bit later, I think, and about how do you kind of map out the student loans with the income potential. So we'll talk more about that. And then the budget method. The budget method there, I'll move on here a little bit for sake of time, but we have the budget method: fully fund the student's education costs, and then provide them just an allowance so they learn how to budget and spend it at college. That can be a good supplement, even if you've done a lot of great savings, or even if the child is helping to fund. That can be one way to have them involved in funding their part, is just they're paying for all their extras. Or their room and board, for example, they're paying their rent, that sort of thing. And then incentivize. There are so many scholarships and ways to get financial aid out there. So, every university, every institution is different and has their own scholarships. There's scholarships you can get at the high school level, at the federal level, at the state level. If a student is motivated and you're working with them enough, scholarships can cover a humongous portion of the cost of college. So we can provide some resources if you're interested in those later, but just wanted to give a nod to to the importance and the value in scholarships. And then this last strategy, I think, can work really well for certain situations, which is you set the expectation that the children are going to either pay their own way or graduate with student loans. And you can have money that is set aside maybe communicate with the child, or you've allocated it to pay off their student loans. If they graduate with any student loans, you can say, hey, if you graduate and meet certain milestones like a GPA or graduating on time, whatever the goals are that you would want to set, you can offer to cover even an even larger part of the college funding plan. But again, all this starts with what are your values? Do you value paying for college, or a student to be on their own paying for it, or somewhere in between where you're tag teaming? So.
Great. Well, I was going to talk a little bit now about the question of where to save. So maybe you've heard all these nuts and bolts and you think, I'm ready to take action. Where do I save? What I would like to talk about are two aspects of the location of your savings. So the first aspect is using the right accounts to achieve a tax savings. And the second aspect is who is the owner of the account and how can you leverage that to your advantage. So I'm going to cover the tax advantages first. And so I think of 529 plans as the behemoth of the college savings world. You may have heard of these. 529 is simply the name of the section of tax code that created these accounts. In essence, 529 plans are simply investment accounts for college savings. The idea is that when a child is young, parents can invest some money, and then as the money grows and grows, all that growth is tax-free, provided that you use that money for qualified expenses. And there's a huge variety of qualified expenses. I mean, even a laptop, software, books, of course, the traditional room and board, food and meal plans, all these things are considered qualified expenses. One thing that can be a little perplexing about 529 plans is that every state has their own plan. I actually remember when I first heard this, it was before I had taken my CFP coursework to become a financial planner. And my oldest was a toddler. And I think I freaked out and I thought, how on earth am I supposed to know where my baby girl is going to go to college? Because I thought I needed, I needed to match the state where my child attended college with the 529 plan. It turns out that's not true. 529 plans are very flexible. For example, you as a parent in Illinois could choose to open a 529 plan in the state of Utah and contribute to that. And when your child decides to, or grows up and decides to attend college, they could attend college in, say, Texas, and that would be no problem. The parent in Illinois can take funds out of the 529 plan in Utah and use that to pay the college in Texas. Another benefit of 529 plans is that you can transfer those funds to another beneficiary. So first, to clarify, there are two names associated with the 529 account. The first is the owner of the account, and that owner is usually the parent, but it doesn't have to be. It's the person who puts the money into the account. And then there's also a beneficiary, and the beneficiary is the person who is receiving the funds. And so you might wonder, what happens if my child decides not to go to college? Well, no problem. You can switch the beneficiary. Maybe you can switch that to another child of yours, or perhaps a niece or a nephew, or maybe you can make yourself the beneficiary and go back to school and earn another degree or something like that. Another advantage of 529 plans is that sometimes you can get an additional tax bonus. You can get a deduction on your state taxes. And it turns out Illinois is one of these states. And I have a little icon in the lower corner of the slides. You can see it's Bright Start. It's a little piggy bank. It's blue and orange. And so if you live in the state of Illinois, and you contribute to the Illinois Bright Start account or a 529 plan in the state of Illinois, you can actually get a tax deduction. And so a deduction basically lowers your taxable income. So for singles, you could lower your income by $10,000 per year if you put $10,000 into a 529 plan in the state of Illinois. For couples, you can lower your income by $20,000. And just to translate that, since our tax rate in Illinois is about 5% for our state tax. A single person could save maybe about $500 maximum, and a couple could save up to $1,000 maximum. Another neat thing about 529 plans in the state of Illinois is that you can actually use them while your child is in college. So for example, if you have a student who's in college, doesn't matter if they're in Illinois or any other state, and you receive a tuition bill and you think, oh, I need to pay this bill. What you can do first is put money into a 529 plan, wait a couple days. As long as it's a state of Illinois 529 plan, then you pull that money back out, pay the tuition bill, and later when you file your taxes, you will actually get a tax deduction in the state of Illinois. Again, assuming everything else about your taxes matches up. There are a few drawbacks or things to just be cautious about with 529 plans though. And the first is that if you pay expenses like college expenses with funds from a 529 plan, you cannot qualify for the federal college tax credits with that same amount of money. So the basic idea is that you can't double dip. There are ways around this though. So what a lot of parents do is they pay some of their child's college expenses out of pocket, and whatever funds they're using out of pocket, they can use to qualify for the federal college tax credits. And then they might pay with the balance or the excess expenses out of a 529 plan. So there are ways around that. There's also something called an overfunding danger with a 529 plan. So if for some reason there were excess funds in the 529 account after your kids attended college, and maybe you didn't have any other relative that you wanted to transfer that to, and let's say you just decided to pull those funds out, because they aren't used for qualified expenses, the earnings will be taxed and there would be an additional 10% penalty. So you just want to be a little bit careful with that. There is another tax advantaged way that you can save for college. And I consider this way a little bit roundabout, and it's through using a Roth IRA. Like 529 plans, earnings are not taxed. So those earnings grow tax-free. But as you can tell from the name, these accounts, IRAs or individual retirement accounts, are actually designed for retirement. So they are not designed for college savings. However, you can pull money under just the right conditions. You can pull money out of a Roth IRA and use that to fund your child's college expenses. One reason why IRAs are popular for college savings is that these are retirement accounts, and so they are not counted on the FAFSA. And the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, which is used by colleges to determine, how much aid your family might need. And so basically by putting money into a Roth IRA, in a sense, it's like hidden and doesn't show up on that application. But there are drawbacks to Roth IRA savings as well. First is they have a lower annual contribution limit. So if most people can contribute $6,000 a year, but up to $7,000 a year if you're over age 50 or 50 or older. High earners, though, cannot contribute to Roth IRAs directly. And so the phase outs start to hit for singles and head of households around earnings of $129,000 a year, or for married filing joint, once you hit $204,000 a year, your ability to even save in a Roth IRA directly is limited. There's also the danger, going back to the first point, is that you might not keep enough funds for your own retirement if you drain your Roth IRA to pay for your kids' college. And the rules surrounding Roth IRAs are very detailed and nuanced, and unfortunately they keep changing too. So you probably would be best served by consulting with a tax professional or a financial professional if you thought about using a Roth IRA for college savings. Now I want to move on to the question of who should own the accounts. And so I thought I'd start with a story. A friend of mine called me recently because she knows I'm interested in finance. And she had recently been to visit her parents-in-law. And while she was there, her mother-in-law got out her checkbook and wanted to write checks to each of my friends' children, which would be the mother-in-law's grandchildren. She said to my friend, she said, please put these in accounts for each one of your kids. Just put it in a savings account in their name, because I know they're going to be going to college soon and I really want to help out. And so the mom and me rejoiced. I thought, yay, a grandparent really, helping their kids out and making sure their grandkids can attend college. This is great. But the financial planner in me was screaming, no, don't do that. It turns out, and everything I'm saying here applies for the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, but the worst thing you can do with assets or money is put it in the name of the child. So on the FAFSA, up to 20% of child-owned assets are expected to be contributed to college costs each year. And that is why putting assets or accounts in the child's name are not the best option. A better option is to save money in the name of the parents. So this would be, for example, a 529 plan. If a parent opens a 529 plan or any other parent assets that are counted by the FAFSA expects that about 5.67, which is a weirdly specific percent of parent-owned assets, are counted towards that family contribution toward the student's college education each year. Now, the best place to put assets when you're thinking about qualifying for need-based aid for college, the best place to put them is in the name of the grandparents. And it turns out grandparents aren't expected to contribute toward their grandchildren's education. So 0% of their assets are counted on the FAFSA. And this is a lovely thing. So going back to the story of my friend, and you might think, well, what can grandparents do if they want to help support their grandkids going to college? Well, there's a number of other strategies. One option is grandparents could gift money to the parents each year. The parents could pay for their students' college education, and then the parents get to claim the tax credits because that student is often a dependent on their tax return. Another option is that grandparents could offer to pay off student loans as a graduation gift. So that relates back to some things Josh was saying about you can incentivize actually graduating. Another option is grandparents could open a 529 plan with the grandparent as the owner and name the grandchild as a beneficiary. I do want to point out that the FAFSA is not the only application that is used to determine family need. So some colleges use something called the CSS profile in conjunction with the FAFSA. Those tend to be private schools or elite public schools. And the way the CSS profile looks at assets is a little bit different. It tends to be very comprehensive. They will look at all 529 plans where the child is the beneficiary, and they can even look at retirement accounts. So I just want to clarify that what I'm saying is related to the FAFSA and the FAFSA alone. Okay, over to you, Josh.
All right, thanks, Sue. So secret for is to be mindful of hidden costs. And I would just, taking a step back just from college planning, I think for those of you that are thinking about college planning, first of all, I commend you for taking a step to learn more and educate yourself. But what we're getting ready to talk about, I think, can apply to even, other savings vehicles as well. So being aware of the cost of anything is just a wise consumer behavior to build. And, unfortunately, some people grow up with this maybe embedded into them as a habit, but others maybe not as much. So it is something that I think I find in talking to, your typical consumers, that investment costs and just costs in the financial services industry alone are misunderstood and vague. And so I'm hoping to shed a little bit of light on that as it pertains to college planning, but also give you some information that I think you can take with you as you pursue other financial endeavors as well. Sue, the slide. And so things to be aware of, when you save into a 529 plan, like Sue was mentioning, and there are other vehicles too. If you were to save into a Roth IRA, there are investments called mutual funds that you can buy, and those are generally the primary vehicles that are used by the average consumer. So in a mutual fund, if I were to just explain that in brief, is you're paying a company or a manager that works with a company to manage a basket of investments. So you're not just owning one stock, for example, but you're owning hundreds, or in some cases thousands of different stocks and bond holdings. But you're not owning them directly. You're paying the manager to buy them for you, and you own just a little sliver of the total basket. So when you start talking about bringing a manager into the mix, buying these mutual funds, there are a bunch of different ways that you can go about purchasing mutual funds. You can buy funds that are every fund has a goal, and it's important to understand. Hey, good question to ask is what is the goal of this mutual fund or this investment? I'm paying someone for access to make this investment. So what is the goal? And there's a thing called a prospectus. That's a jargon term there, but there's a thing called a prospectus that every organized investment is required to file, and has a lot of good information in it. So if you're ever curious about learning more, it's a very dense read, but it has a lot of great information about any investment that you would purchase. You can always review its prospectus. So prospect us is how that's spelled. And so if I were to oversimplify mutual funds, there are funds where the manager of the basket of investments is trying to beat the market or outperform something. Those funds tend to have a little bit higher carrying costs. There's extra effort involved and decision-making involved with trying to beat the market. And that's a very difficult thing for a mutual fund manager to do consistently over time. There are funds out there that can do that, but it's very hard to find those funds and then to, and for those funds to perform consistently above what the market returns. So you see down there, managed funds under fund expenses. Just know that there's a thing called an expense ratio. So I know there's some technical terms here, but an expense ratio you should be able to find with any pooled investment, like a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund. These funds have embedded expenses that do impact how the fund performs. So it's important to know what those expenses are. So one, what's the goal of the fund? What's it trying to accomplish? Two, what are the expenses of this fund? Because some funds can carry a very high expense. If they're operating in an investment space that's requires lots of effort, like in an international equities, for example, anything overseas, that can require there's a few more costs of doing business as a mutual fund manager. So they charge more. So the expense ratios of those funds just tends to be higher. So we put in here 12B1 fees. So, those can be as low as 0%. There actually are funds that have 0% carrying costs now. You won't find them a lot in 529 plans, none that I'm aware of. But there just in generally speaking, there are funds out there with 0% fees. And then you can find funds that have 1% or even higher than 1% fees. And, if that 1% is a drag on the investment performance. So it's just really important to know, again, what the goal of the fund is. And then also, what are the expenses of the fund? What's it costing me to try to achieve, for the manager to try to achieve that goal? In addition to that, there are commissions. So if you're working with a broker or an investment person, I promise you they're getting paid in some way, shape, or form. So it's always a great question to ask that person. So the mutual fund expenses we talked about. Now we're talking about a person. If you're working with someone, it's good to ask a fair question of how are you paid? I want to understand how you're compensated so that I can understand how the advice I'm being given should be viewed. Lots of extremely great advisors out there and people doing great work. But it is important to understand how they're compensated, because if, for example, an advisor is being paid a commission based on a fund that they're selling, that is going to mean that that mutual fund has a higher cost. Doesn't mean that's a bad fund. It just means that, you know, that advisor might have an incentive to sell that fund. So it's just important for you to understand if there is a conflict of interest there. The advisors should be disclosing that, but it's always good if it's not clear to you to be asking that question. So like I said, with commissions, I mean, they can be, we put some numbers up here. They really range all over the board. So please don't anchor to these numbers. These are kind of averages, rough averages. But think about it this way: if you were to put $100,000 or let's say $1,000 into a mutual fund, you know, if it has a 5% load, upfront commission, that means that your investment immediately once it's purchased is not worth $1,000. It's only worth $950. We mentioned annuities here only just for comparison. Annuities are insurance contracts, which you typically don't need for college, but you know, just be cautious in understanding what the cost and what flexibilities you're giving up when you go with using an annuity as a savings vehicle. So again, those costs, these are just very rough averages, but you know, 6%, you know, or more. So they can be more expensive than mutual fund costs. That's the point to take away. Sue? Thank you. So these are just some comparisons, just to give you an idea of what how the difference in costs can impact impact a certain amount of savings. So the example we're using here, and I won't spend a ton of time on this because I believe you'll have access to these slides, but $250 a month for 15 years is how much you're saving. And we look here, how much of a commission here on the left is involved with the investment that you're purchasing with that $250 a month. And what is the expense ratio? What is the carrying cost of that fund, which, like I said before, is dragging on the ongoing performance of the fund? And you can see low commission, low expense, to the other end of the spectrum, high commission, high upfront, and high ongoing expense. You can see over that 15-year period, the difference you could end up with, and again, we're just using a rough example here, but you can see that the difference in the final investment value, going with a lower commission, lower expense, can be $85,000 versus $70,000. You know, it can be a $17,000 difference here. Now, I want to caveat all of this. A commission is you're paying someone for their professional advice. So I don't want you to feel like a commission is a bad thing, but it is important to understand conflicts of interest before you just go through with purchasing an investment, understanding how someone's compensated and what their intentions might be when they're making an investment recommendation to you. So again, just wise consumer behavior. So I hope this helps you understand the costs just a little bit more, often overlooked aspect of saving in general, but so important because it can have a dramatic impact over the long term. Sue, back to you. Sue, I think you're muted. I'm not sure if you.
Sue, I think you muted yourself. You have to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I there now?
Yeah.
I apologize. I just disappeared for a moment there.
Okay.
Let me go back to, am I sharing my screen or not?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you're sharing your screen.
Okay, perfect. Great. So I just wanted to talk.
Sorry, Sue. I just realized I was
handing
handing my slide over to you.
Okay.
That's okay. I'll take it back over. Sorry to everyone about that. I saw 529 and you talking about Bright Start, and I got excited to have you talk about that. So speaking about the 529, Sue talked about this a little bit, so I'll just build on what she said earlier, but you can do this on your own. There is a lot of technical aspects of investing to understand. I hope I've shed some light on some of that, but at Bright Start, we're showing you the page. You can log in, you can create an account. You click that open an account, and we do this for clients all the time. And oftentimes we find that it's pretty intuitive for them. The places where they get stuck, so said another way, the clients can really actually do this our clients can do this on their own. They find it very intuitive to be able to do. But some places where they get stuck is making an investment choice. And again, it's as you're looking through investment options, one of the things I wanted to highlight, and I can't make a recommendation for you because what's best for one person isn't best for another. But one thing I will shed some light on is one option. You can build your own portfolios within these 529 plans and mix and match your investments. And just as it applies to a lot of 401ks and retirement plans out there, 529 plans also have what's called a target date fund. And I'll explain that in brief. And like I said, you can always look up the prospectus for these mutual funds and understand more. But the 529 plan with Bright Start, they call it an age-based fund. And what that means is that the basket of investments actually gets more conservative. You buy one investment and the basket of investments gets more conservative as the child grows closer to their target age, their age for college. So that's we call it the couch potato method, where you're not sure how to manage these things on an ongoing basis. This is just one of many tools out there to help make it a little bit easier. So again, I would encourage you, look at the age-based options, and then read the prospectus to understand what that fund actually does, and then you can decide for yourself if that's what's right for you. But like I said, you can do this on your own. You can also work with a professional if this just all feels a little too overwhelming. But again, just be mindful of the costs. So now, Sue, I'm sorry, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Well, this is our last secret, and it's about public schools are not always the lowest cost. I don't know about you, but I love a deal. Better than a deal, a steal. In public schools, if you look at their sticker price, it is true they are and often do appear to be lower. But just as when you go to the hospital, it's really hard to know what your bill is going to be until it arrives in the mail. The same way, it's hard to know what your student will pay at a particular school until you actually apply. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks maybe for getting a little bit of a better deal in the college application process. But to start this off, I want to show you a really lovely website. It's powered by the US Department of Education called College Scorecard, and it just has a plethora of statistics. I mean, you can look up any school, public or private, in the United States. You can see their graduation rate. You can see how much it costs. You can see how much people actually pay, like how much aid do they get. You can see what is their graduation rate, and when students do graduate, on average, how much do they owe? Like what is the balance of their student loans? You can even look up majors, and if there are enough students who graduated from this institution with that particular major, you can even see how much you might be expected to earn upon graduation. So it's a really neat website that can help with some of these other things I'm going to talk about. And so the first strategy is simply to apply to at least 6 to 8 schools, or you could even encourage your student to apply to more. Because financial aid is not just about the numbers on your FAFSA. Sometimes schools need to fill an enrollment quota, or sometimes they're looking for a student with leadership qualities or some qualities that your student possesses. And so until you actually get the letter back from the school telling you what your student's financial aid package is, you just can't know what it's going to cost for your student. Another strategy that I love is the strategy of competing offers. And so one way to do this is if your student has a dream school or a school they would really love to go to, is to find out what schools are in the athletic conference of your target school. Like, who do they play? Who does their basketball team play against? Who does their football team play against? And make sure you apply to a number of those schools. And then once you receive all the financial aid offers, in case a competitor of the school that your student loves has offered a better financial aid package, you can encourage your student to call the financial aid office at their target desired school and say, hey, I love this school and I would love to come here. However, you know, your competitor, whatever that the name of that institution is, offered, you know, gave me a better deal. And I'm just wondering, can you match it? They might say yes, they might say no, but it's always worth a try. And again, Josh has already said this, but don't rule out student loans. Student loans aren't necessarily bad. It's just too many student loans can be a problem. And so this rule of thumb is basically not to borrow more than your expected annual starting salary once you graduate. So I looked this up earlier this week, and let's imagine that my goal is to be an elementary teacher in Urbana. And so I looked up and found out that upon as a starting first year teacher in Urbana at the elementary level, I could expect to earn $45,000 a year. And so if I were in college, I would want to make sure not to borrow more than $45,000. That would be the absolute maximum. Basically, I could borrow about $11,000 a year to fund my education. And when we find when students borrow more than that, that starts to hinder their quality of life after they graduate. They might have to really delay buying a house. They might have to delay getting married or having kids. And so that's why you want to be careful, really talk with your student about, just about when they get those aid letters, make sure they understand the difference between what is a loan versus a grant versus a scholarship. Like, do you have to pay that back or not? And make sure they understand all of those pieces. And it turns out, like, if you're in a situation or your student is in a situation where they might have to borrow more than they want, get creative, whether it's going to a community college for a little while, maybe taking a semester or a year off to work or get a paid internship, whatever it takes. But try to work to make sure that your student does not borrow, basically bite off more than they can chew with their student loans. And so just a few things to remember in summary: put your own retirement first. Start saving now, whether it's for your retirement or for your kids' college. Something is always better than nothing. And then finally, talk openly with your kids about how much support you can provide. And so if you have questions, I think there's like a question and answer box. You can add them to the chat. And I've also put some things up here, which are some of our favorite resources. That college scorecard website, which has just so many statistics. Brightstart.com, that's where you can get an Illinois 529 plan, open one for your kids. And then savingforcollege.com, it has a lot of articles about 529 plans, or all the nuances on college savings and student loans. Let's see, it looks like we've got, oh, nope, answered, okay.
Yeah, we'll soon I will stay on for, we had a couple of questions that related just to resources, so we went ahead and answered those, but we're happy to take any questions here. Eva, I know we're probably right at time here, but if we have a few minutes to stick around for questions, we certainly will. And I know, Eva, we'll turn it back over to you to wrap up. And like I said, we'll stick around if you'll have questions.
Thanks, Sue and Josh. That was great. As Sue and Josh mentioned, I think we do have a question here. If you have a question, you could type it into the chat or you could raise hands. We could unmute you so you could ask your question out loud. So we do have a question here. Let's see.
Yeah, I think all the questions have been answered that were submitted. So
okay. Yeah, I'm really surprised because my son went to Northwestern in 2014 and the tuition was about 60,000. And I know that it increased about 5 or 6% every year. And I'm surprised, wow, this is how much it costs today, 84,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, actually, 2021 is the first year that the inflation adjusted cost of college has actually decreased.
Oh,
And so I don't actually know why that is. It could be maybe that, with the advent of online education and the pandemic, maybe colleges are being forced to lower their prices a little. I don't know.
So when my son was in middle school, I opened a College Illinois account. But then I think the one time their investment wasn't doing that great. And so I noticed that I have to pay, I pay more than their locked tuition for 4 years. So I moved the money to 529.
Yeah.
And I like 529 because it not only covers your tuition, but it also covers your room and boards. And if they buy the computer and some other things, that also covers those expenses. And the benefit as well, like you say, for a single parent, single maximum is 10,000 and a couple is 20,000. So that immediately put money in, and in 2 weeks, I take the money out, immediately save the tax for 500 per person. So it's really a good.
Yeah, it's Eva, you bring up a good point that we didn't touch on with the 529 plans, but I oftentimes get this question, so I guess I'll answer it. You may not have realized you had the question. So the 529 plan, it is money that's under your control. So it's sponsored by the state of Illinois, but the state of Illinois is not, they don't possess your money. So they're not the ones managing it. It's your money. It's just held in a 529 account sponsored by the state of Illinois' 529 program. So there used to be, or there still are savings vehicles where you can hand over money, and kind of prepay college, but those are less popular now than they used to be. And those would be if someone's worried about, the status of the state government, and if there's any worry about giving up ownership of funds and handing over the management of those funds, then maybe the 529 is the better route, the Bright Start 529. It's also worth mentioning that you really should be with the tax deductions and everything. I Sue mentioned this, but I'll just emphasize it. It's great to confirm this with your account. Whoever prepares your taxes should verify any information we talked about today. It's pretty straightforward just in terms of how the tax stuff works with this, but it's always recommended to check with a tax person just to make sure that what you're hearing today translates correctly over to your personal tax situation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in about those prepaid tuition plans. College Illinois is the last time I looked at their website, they are no longer accepting new, you cannot contribute more funds to that at this point. I think the Illinois State Legislature is working on stabilizing the plan, but for now they just are not taking new contributions. So even if you were in love with the idea of prepaid tuition, too bad. You're not allowed to invest in that at this moment. Yeah. And
sorry, another comment there, that each state also does have their own 529 plan. I think, Sue, you may have alluded to that. So Indiana has its own state-sponsored 529 plan. You can save to any state's 529 plan. They're all different. They all kind of can accomplish the same thing, but the benefit for Illinois, like Sue mentioned, there is an extra tax benefit. And actually, the Illinois sponsored plan is one of the best, the most highly rated plans in the nation. So we're fortunate to have such a great plan here to use as Illinois residents. I think we've got all the questions answered, Eva. So if you want to take it back over and.
Sure. Thank you, Sue and Josh, for the informative and helpful information presentation. And thank you all for your attendance tonight. A recording of this event and many of our previous webinars will be found on Champaign Public Library's YouTube channel. Due to the COVID-19 restriction, our next series on March 17 will also be a virtual webinar. The title is Broadening Your Knowledge of Investing. We invite Nicole Kingley, a financial advisor from Edward Jones. Be sure to register this webinar on library's online event calendar. We won't be able to record the next webinar, so be sure to attend the live webinar. Hope to see you there, and good night, everyone.